Hey guys, Dylan from the Geek Duo here, and today I'll be bringing you my RWBY Volume 8 Chapter 5 breakdown. Now, before we get started with the episode, I just want to put a reminder that I'm going to start putting at the start of every episode, in which the details outlined in this episode of the breakdown series are my interpretations of the events that happened in the show, and they may or may not be the intended interpretations from the creators. I also want to quickly make note that this is my favorite episode of the volume so far, and has one of the more satisfying fight scenes in it. The episode begins at the Amity launch site, where we spend 80 to 90% of the episode, and we see Pietro putting the finishing touches on the communication antenna. We find out that while most of the communication features are finalized and have been since before Salem arrived, there wasn't enough power in the thrusters, like enough propellant dust or anything, to actually lift Amity to the required height yet. So Pietro came up with the brilliant idea to blow up the dust mines below Amity and use the concussive wave from that explosion to push Amity into the air along with the thrusters that they have. We also see that Maria has found a mech. It's actually an advanced and upgraded version of a Atlassian Paladin, the armor that we saw in volumes 1 to 3. And she's using it to do all the heavy lifting, to bring all the machinery over to where Pietro needs it. Pietro reveals that there are inbuilt stabilizers in Amity that will activate once they reach broadcast altitude, so that they don't have to worry about using thrusters to keep them at a suitable height. They can just keep Amity stable up there. And once they're stabilized, that's when Pietro is going to send the message out to Remnant and then pilot Amity away from Atlas. Penny voices her concerns that what if no one is able or willing to show up to aid Atlas? And she tries again to get her dad's permission to stay behind. But Pietro quickly interrupts her, saying that they're not going to have this conversation again, and that she is coming with him. To which Penny just replies with, "Yes, sir." Which, that got a reaction out of me in the, my reaction, because, well, we've never heard her call her dad sir before, only General Ironwood. And in a sense, she's viewing her dad giving her orders the same as the general giving her orders, something she has to follow whether she wants to or not. Or had to. And Maria, who, while in the mech, she puts the mech's hand on its hip and just looks down towards Pietro as she tries to reason with him once the call ends, asking if, don't you reckon Penny's had enough of people telling her what to do? But Pietro just tells her to prepare for launch. When Penny arrives back on Amity, Pietro begins the launch sequence, and we see that the plan from episode 3 was successful, as Amity pings Penny for authorization, not Ironwood's terminal, and once she verifies it, Pietro begins the countdown on the bombs. He also advises that the other two hang on to something, as He didn't have time to install seatbelts before he activates some gravity dust in the legs of his walkers to help keep him stationary. As Penny is helping Maria back into her mech, however, there is a sudden loud rumble and a large fireball flies up past the terminal. Penny rushes to the edge of the platform and sees a hole in the floor of Amity, through which she can see Cinder standing on top of an airship, with her maiden powers activated. Penny flies down to fight the villains as their ship lands, but before either party can begin their attack, the bombs in the mine explode, setting off the desired chain reaction from the dust veins and propelling Amity like they wanted it to. As Amity shoots into the air, Penny, who is just hovering in the air, is suddenly met with the floor of the Colosseum as her and Emerald are thrown along the ground, though Cinder is able to brace herself a little by going down on one knee just as the impact starts, so as not to be sprawled on the ground. And she uses this forced pause in combat to summon a barrage of swords around her. As this is happening, we get a quick cut to Ironwood and the Aesops, and they get a notification to see the explosion in the dust mine and Amity take off. And then Ironwood says, "It's time," which means my theory that they were going to find out that Penny had the launch sequence codes and were going to wait until Amity launched before hacking her. That was actually true, which means Ironwood's not as lost as he could be at this point, because he's still allowing his initial plan to go through before forcing the inaction of his current plan. Cinder makes a comment on how Penny's friends aren't with her and they've left you with all the work, like some tool. But Penny quickly rebuffs this, and as she's doing so, Amity, it stops its initial burst of speed, which means Cinder is able to stand up and launch her swords at Penny, who tries to block them using her own swords to create 2 spinning circles of blades. Maria, who is fully in the mech now, drops down in front of Penny from the platform above to block the rest of the blades, telling Cinder to get away from her, you bitch. But before she can say any bad words, Neo flies her airship straight into the mech. Penny and Cinder begin flying around the Colosseum, while Maria uses her mech to wrestle with the airship, managing to slam its nose into the ground, but Neo just flips it into reverse and flies backwards, pulling the mech off balance as she does so. While Maria recovers from this stagger, she looks around to find the ship, but she can't see it. All she can see is a green-haired girl with her hands up like this, before she gasps and quickly turns to her left, but isn't able to make the mech react in time before Neo's ship reappears and slams into her once again. The whole mech is slammed into the wall and seems to no longer be functioning as she pops open the hatch and tries to crawl out. As she's doing this, however, Neo lands the ship next to her and walks over to the mech, and by the time Maria has managed to get herself half out, Neo is standing right in front of her. Maria asks Neo, what does she want? And Neo, she turns into Ruby before grabbing Maria and throwing her away. Though Maria is able to roll onto her feet and stands up with a smile. The two of them start fighting as Pietro looks down from above before rushing over to the terminal, begging Amity to be high enough for them to start the broadcast. And when he sees that they're in the green, he activates the stabilizers. Or at least he attempts to, because suddenly error messages, they flash up on his screen, and it's revealed that when Cinder used her fire powers to bore a hole through the bottom of Amity, she damaged one of the stabilizers, and without the four of them, all the remaining stabilizers can do is just gradually glide Amity downwards until it is no longer in the proper range. He begins typing furiously at his keyboard as the shot cuts to the fight between Cinder and Penny, and we see that Penny has led Cinder outside of the arena, and they're flying and fighting their way through the landing docks before rising up above the top of Amity. Cinder is using her maiden swords to send flaming air slashes in Penny's direction, and one of them manages to hit her, but she simply throws one of her own swords to stab into the ceiling of Amity and swing herself back onto course. Cinder, seeing that her slashes aren't doing anything, she jabs her two swords together and they turn into a bow, a move we haven't seen her do since Volume 3, I'm pretty sure, and she knocks some magic arrows and fires them towards Penny. Penny, however, she's able to dodge these arrows even easier than she was dodging the majority of Cinder's flame blasts, but as she does so, she notices that when the arrows stab into the top of Amity, they explode. So she gets the idea to just fly away, lead Cinder as far away from Amity as she can, which works for a few seconds before Cinder wisens onto her plan and she just stops midair. She turns her back to Penny and waits until she knows Penny has noticed that she stopped before turning back with a smirk and shooting off towards Atlas again, with Penny being the one chasing her now. It then cuts back inside Amity, and we see that Maria is very easily holding her own against Neo, just blocking and dodging every swing that Neo throws with one arm behind her back, and her weapon, it's not even out of her walking stick form because the blade is still folded down. Neo does eventually manage to hook the handle of her parasol around Maria's walking stick and uses it to throw her into the air again, but Maria just flips in the midair, opens the blade of her weapon, and hooks it around the same handle that launched her, and then pulls herself back towards Neo, landing with both her feet in Neo's face, and then launching off. Neo rushes her once again, only to be blocked again, this time by the top of Maria's blade. We then see that Pietro's terminal says that there's only 1 minute and 5 seconds left. And Pietro, he turns around because he hears a noise behind him, only to see that Cinder is flying around and melting the support pillars connecting the platform that he's currently on to the ceiling. She manages to start melting 3 of the pillars before she's stopped by Penny, who asks her, "Why are you doing this? Why do you work for someone like Salem?" And Cinder replies, "I don't work for anyone." Which is a stark contrast to what we saw of her last episode with the whole "without you I am nothing" thing. She also says that Penny, she wouldn't serve anyone either if she hadn't have been built that way. But Penny quickly denies this, saying, "I choose to fight for the people I care about, and those who care about me." But before their conversation can go on, the support pillars begin to groan and melt further away from the ceiling, so Penny, she quickly jams all of her swords into the platform and then shoots 2 beams of maiden ice at 2 of the 3 melted pillars. Cinder, she takes this opportunity to attack Penny again, trying to grab her with the grim arm, but Penny is able to stop it with her robot strength. At least, that is until Cinder reaches onto the robot hand and starts trying to melt it, which pains Penny enough for her grip to loosen. And this allows Cinder to just grab a hold of her face and start sucking out her maiden powers. The pain of this causes Penny to stop hovering where she was, and the 2 of them pendulum under the platform as Penny's swords are still stuck in the top. While they're under the platform, Penny, she's able to push past the pain enough for her to use her powers to summon 8 ice swords that she tries to pry Cinder off of her with. And on the first attempt, she manages to get Cinder far enough away from her that she can move her legs up between the 2 of them, and then as she tries to lever her off again, she also uses her rocket boosters to push herself in the opposite direction, which successfully frees her from Cinder's grasp. Penny falls to the ground in pain, which distracts Maria long enough for Neo to knock her down, and Cinder, she turns and looks at where Emerald is standing with a smirk, as she frees herself from the blade that had pinned her to the wall. Neo begins to angrily walk towards Maria, drawing the handle blade from its sheath, but before she can enter striking distance, she is suddenly hit by a giant green laser which shoots her backwards and slams her into her own ship, shattering her aura. Penny struggles to her feet and flies up to where Cinder is hovering. Cinder creates a magic maiden spear similar to the one that she impaled Weiss with, and before she attacks, has Emerald create a ring of cinders around Penny. Penny just simply charges up a maiden-powered storm behind her as she waits for Cinder to start her attack. And when she does so, Penny just simply uses her robot eyes to locate Cinder's heat source, so completely ignoring all the other illusions and aiming a laser towards the real Cinder. Cinder throws the spear just before Penny fires off the laser, which completely decimates the spear and hits Cinder right in the face, pushing her back to a wall that's a good half of the arena away and holding her with enough concussive force that when the laser stops, she just flops to the ground unconscious. Emerald runs up to where Cinder landed, and she begins to cradle her to check if she's okay. She notices that Penny is approaching them with a look of indifference on her face, so she quickly turns around and fires a warning shot at Penny, which she's able to dodge easily, but the bullet flies and hits Pietro's terminal and almost hits Pietro. So Penny, seeing this, she turns back to Emerald with the most anger we've seen on her face this entire show. But she doesn't hold her anger for long as she gets a good look at what Emerald's doing. The way in which she's cradling Cinder, and the way she says, "I know I can't defeat you, but I'm willing to put a lot of holes in that before you try to take me down." Which basically, yeah, I'm no match for you, but I will risk my life to protect this woman. And if I can do damage to your plan while doing so, so be it. So Penny just lowers her weapons and lets Emerald carry Cinder back to their ship. And the last we see of the villains is their ship flying away from Amity. Before we continue with the episode breakdown, I just wanted to say that I feel so bad for Emerald because we all know that she's going to be the one blamed for Cinder's failure in battle, either by Cinder or she's going to blame herself because she promised Cinder that she would be valuable for this mission because she'd practiced with her semblance, she'd strengthened her semblance, and when Cinder actually needed her semblance, it was used against the one person that it wouldn't work on, and it failed. So she's going to cop so much blame, and I just feel so bad because Emerald is one of the villains I actually care about. I like all the villains, but there are 4 I care about. That being Neo, Roman, Emerald, and Hazel. I will be severely unhappy with Emerald's character arc if she either dies for Cinder or she's still allied with Cinder up until the end of the show. After the villains fly away, we see that Penny, she's flying Maria up to where Pietro is, and they're all happy that they survived, at least well, they're still happy that they survived, but they're not as happy with their situation once Pietro reveals that they've missed their opportunity for the broadcast, and that they're just slowly drifting down towards the north. But then, Penny has an idea. She suggests, what if she flies outside, gets under Amity, and uses her thrusters to push Amity back into the sky? But just like before, Pietro cuts her off by just saying no. That it's too dangerous, you're already damaged from battle, the cold out there would just drain you more. But this time, she tries to argue her point, saying this is our only course of action. And Maria, once again, takes a side, mentioning the bigger picture. But Pietro is having none of it as he snaps at them, saying he doesn't care about the bigger picture if it means he has to lose his daughter again, because he's gone through that once before and he doesn't feel he'd be able to go through it again. He just wants to be able to see Penny live. But Penny, being Penny, says that saving people is her living her life. And this manages to get Pietro to reluctantly agree with it. And he's basically saying, okay, fine, get us into range, but come back in as soon as this broadcast is done. She then flies outside and takes a moment to look down at Atlas and Monstra, which is actually the official name of the Grim Whale, based off of Monstro from the Pinocchio story. And she looks down at them below Amity, and then she looks up at the aurora shining above them. And she gives one last smile before swooping down to begin the ascent. We see on Pietro's terminal that she is succeeding and quickly bringing Amity back up to the required height. But as it cuts back to Penny, we see that she's struggling to do that with just her own feet thrusters. So she activates her maiden powers and just turns the green beams from her feet into a singular condensed blue beam that helps push them up even faster. She gets them back into broadcast range, and Pietro quickly begins showing Ruby's message to the world. The recorded Ruby quickly introduces herself to everyone before informing them that Atlas is under attack and they need help. That this isn't an attack from a new enemy, and it's not an attack from another kingdom. It's an enemy that people have been fighting for centuries, going by the name of Salem, and that she's the same enemy responsible for the attacks on Beacon, the attacks on Haven, the person who has at one point controlled the White Fang, the hack that leads the Enthroned, and the Grim simultaneously. It then seemingly skips ahead a bit, because she says, I know the idea of maidens and relics can seem crazy, but there are people who can confirm what I've been saying. This being Glinda Goodwitch from Beacon and Headmaster Theodore from Shade, which is the first time we actually hear Theodore's name in the show. He is mentioned in Before the Dawn. I'm pointing to my copy of the book right now, though you probably would have had no idea about that. But yeah, he's the member of Ozpin's faction that is in Shade Academy, based off of Dorothy. Or at least his name is an anagram for Dorothy. Anyway, back to the episode. The last thing she tells them in this portion of the message is that General Ironwood can no longer be trusted. I say this portion because there are actually 3 times throughout the episode that the message is being shown with scenes cut in between them so that we can see other people's reactions to the message. But throughout this entire portion of the message, we see several familiar faces and locations across Remnant. We first see Central Command and Bill as the message begins. We see the two mantle drunks from Volume 7, Episode 1. We see Haven's train terminal from Volume 6, Episode 1. We see the Cotter Ark family, with Adrian very happy to see Ruby again. We see Whitley, who isn't exactly a cameo because he was in the last episode, but we see a cameo of Nicholas Schnee because Whitley's in his dad's office, not in his room like Weiss told him to. I think that's actually a younger Jacques now that I think of it. Anyway, we see the people in the slums, specifically the older lady who complains about not being able to go to Atlas, her granddaughter and her daughter, and a couple of other faunesses that we've seen glimpses of, and Fiona's uncle. We see Neptune and Sun in Vacuo. And while I would have liked to have seen Sage and Scarlet, or Teen Coffee, or Nolan, or Indigo with them, it's very likely that Rooster Teeth, they haven't been able to finish all the models for those characters yet, and it's not really needed to rush character models for just a single cameo when they won't be actually in the show for another season or two. I'm coming back to that point later. We see Helia in Menagerie. Maybe it's Haven, I don't know. It's the top of a Asian inspired building, so it could be one of the two. And we see that she's getting a call from Gira. We see whichever sector of Mantle that the two drunks and Joanna are in. We see the shopkeep in his store. And this is when Ruby's saying people like Glinda Goodwitch and Theodore from Shade. He turns to his right. And then we see a very shocked Glinda. And that is why I mentioned the character models. Because Glinda, she's not actually had any new footage since volume, very early in volume 4. So the fact that they went through the effort of giving her a actual new character model in the new engine is very surprising and a lot of work if it's just for a simple cameo. And the final two we see for this section is Ironwood and the Aesops. As Ruby's saying, Ironwood can no longer be trusted. But only one of that group is smiling at the fact that the broadcast is going. And that is obviously Marrow. As Ruby is warning everyone about Ironwood, Harriet angrily turns off the screen that they're watching the broadcast on, and Ironwood turns to talk to Watts at his workbench. Ironwood comments on the fact that Pietro's proxy plan, it was a success, and Watts replies by explaining that this means that Penny, her system is communicating with the terminal at the security facility and Amity, which means because it's a connected system, it's easier for Watts to bridge into her system. And as he's saying this, he pulls a chip out of Penny's lost sword and replaces it with one of his own. It cuts back to Ruby's message as she says that even if the world doesn't come to Atlas's aid, they now have the time necessarily to prepare for Salem's arrival in their kingdoms, and that even though Salem can't be destroyed, that doesn't mean she can't be defeated. This, and her earlier comment about maidens and relics, insinuates that she told the world about what Jin told them and what Crow told them way back in volumes 6 and 4 respectively, and this was part of the message that we as the audience didn't get to see because we already know this stuff. She also makes a good point in saying that if Salem was unstoppable, then she would have acted long ago, and the fact that she's been so hesitant means that she at least in some way sees humanity as a threat. She doesn't actually mention the threat part till towards the end, but I'm linking it back to here. And she also says, even if Atlas does fall, the people of Remnant, they need to continue the fight. This part of the speech is accompanied by images of Tyrion sitting by Salem's side as they listen into the video, and Salem looks concerningly happy about this broadcast, which probably means that she did in fact know these children more than Cinder expected her to, and the reason she told Cinder not to follow Penny was so that this broadcast could actually happen. Which, if that's the case, she's going to be mighty pissed at Cinder. I mean, she was already going to be pissed at Cinder, but even more so. It also shows the rest of Amity team, with Nora, who's still unconscious, though now most of her body has been covered in bandages, and she's lying in what I assume to be Weiss's bed, while Weiss, Blake and Ruby, they're sitting on the ground beside her. And look at how adorable Ruby and Blake look in this image. Anyway, the part ends with the shot I mentioned earlier of Watts getting Ironwood's permission to place his chip into Penny's sword. Which, now that I'm reading that out loud, it sounds incredibly dirty. If I have to deal with that thought, you have to deal with that thought. As soon as he places the chip in the sword, the show does this really nice transition to show Penny's immediate reaction to the new code running through her system, where she stops holding onto Atlas as her eyes briefly flash red, and she grasps her head in pain, falling for a bit before being able to take control back and resuming her previous position. Pietro, concerned about his daughter, asks, "What's happening?" And she tells him honestly that she doesn't know, and her eyes flash red again. The final part of Ruby's message that we get to see, at least, is being viewed from within a familiar household, and it's of her commenting on how Amity Tower will hopefully bring the world back together, before getting ironically cut off by Watts' code taking down Amity Tower. We then see Tai Yang Xiaolong reaching out towards his screen, begging his daughter to come back, as Zwei waddles over to comfort him. I just want to make comment on what must have been going on in Tai's head throughout this entire message. It probably would have been something along the lines of, why did my show just get interrupted? Wait, is that Ruby? Why is she on TV? She's a full huntress now? She helped reconnect the CCT? Why is she talking to all of Remnant? Why is she in Atlas? What do you mean Atlas is under attack? Salem's the one attacking Atlas? How do you know about Salem, the Paladins, and the relics? What do you mean Salem can't be destroyed? You know of the members of the Inner Circle? What do you mean Ironwood can't be trusted? James, if you hurt my girls, I swear to the gods, they turned Amity Coliseum into a CCT tower? Wait, what happened? Where did she go? Great. Now I've got to go talk to my ex-wife that's been squatting in our daughter's room for the past couple months. Force her to take me to Atlas so I can help my family. But with each thought getting louder and more aggressive within his head. Hey guys, quick edit here. I forgot to mention within the breakdown when I was talking about Tai going to talk to Raven about getting to Atlas, I forgot to mention this funny theory that I saw while in between one of the cuts that said, imagine if Tai and Raven choose to portal to Crow, and Tai's just like, Crow, I leave you alone with my daughters for a couple months and you end up in prison. Oh well, open a portal to Yang. They teleport to Yang out in the tundra next to a river of liquid grim. And it's just like, God damn it, Yang. How the hell did you come across this? And they, it's like, Raven, do you have a portal to anyone else that would be useful? I have one to Oscar, because he's Ozpin. Okay, take us there. He should be with Ruby. Teleport to Oscar. And we're in Salem's fortress. Great. Well, good thing we left Yang by that river. Let's grab this kid and leave. We then cut back to Amity, with Pietro telling Penny that she needs to come back inside. They've done enough. But Penny can't anymore. She's doing her best to still fight off the new chip, as her eyes are staying red longer and longer with each flash. And she begins to talk on two different wavelengths, because on one she's talking to Pietro and on the other she's saying the vault and I need to go. And before she can figure out what's happening, before Pietro can figure out what's happening, Penny, her eyes go dim, and with that her whole system shuts down and she begins to fall back towards Atlas. The last we see and hear of her is her re-entering the atmosphere in a ball of fire and telling her dad that she loves him. And Pietro, hearing this, obviously calls out to her and then begins crying. We also see Maria try to comfort him before the scene cuts back to Atlas team, as Harriet informs Ironwood that global comms are back down, and he informs them that Penny's still not responding to his messages. He asks what he did, and Watts plays it off saying, "Oh, I'm sure her systems are just rebooting, and maybe Pietro isn't the genius you thought he was." But I actually missed this last sentence about Pietro in my reaction, because it has heavy implications that Watts purposefully shut down Amity, and that wasn't a part of what Ironwood wanted. Which, the second part we know to be true, and the first part, now that I think about it, is obvious, because Watts is still working with Salem right now. Also, look at this image, and look at Marrow, how he's giving Harriet the death stare, because, well, she was the one who turned off the broadcast, and the one who hates the kids who were his friends the most. Ironwood knows something's up with what Watts did though, and he throws his scroll at Watts, but Watts easily knocks it away, and it breaks when it hits the wall. And so Ironwood, he instructs Winter to take the Aesops, go find where Penny landed, and bring her to the vault. And Harriet, take him back to his cell. Which Harriet is more than happy to do, as she seemingly cracks her knuckles. The last we see of this group is Watts packing up his tools, turning off his screens, and when Ironwood and Harriet's backs are turned, picking up Ironwood's scroll. Which, one, him having access to a scroll is bad enough, but him having access to the general of Atlas's scroll, that opens a whole new can of worms and a whole new set of systems for him to hack into, because Ironwood likely has control over the hard light shields protecting Atlas. Ironwood most definitely has control over the prison cells. So, once the Aesops leave to go track down Penny, because he'll also have access to the security cameras, he's just gonna shut off the cells. He's going to open the door and just walk out, shutting down every security system they have in place and allowing Salem to begin her invasion. Because that was what's his true plan. At least in my mind it was his true plan. Could be proven wrong, most likely going to be proven right though. The final cut of the episode takes us to Mantle Team, as Yang is questioning, that was broadcast. The fact that we're seeing it means that comms should be up. So why aren't they? But before Jean or Ren can speculate on the matter, they're all interrupted by a rumble that is close by. We then see them running down the hills that the camera panned over last episode, and they come to a stop near the crack that we saw opening at the end of the last episode. However, it's a teensy bit more than a crack in the ice now, as it's grown into a river that stretches as far as they can see in one direction and all the way to Mantle in the other direction. And it's made of liquid Grimm. Now, this is actually happening at sunrise, which means that it's been at least 6 to 8 hours between when Ruby and that arrived at the Schnee Manor and when Ren and Yang had their argument to now. Meaning that Amity took quite a considerable amount of time to finalize its construction, and because we know that the fight with Cinder took at least 3 minutes, and we know that from Penny the broadcast is a few minutes long. Let's say generously it's 8 minutes. Let's say 15 minutes from when Penny planted the bombs to when Penny dropped from Atlas. Okay? That means it was 5 3/4 hours for them to finalize Amity. At least. Also, this is inconsequential to the actual story, but I, for some reason, thought that Mantle Team was to the west of the river, because I thought it was Mantle Team, and the river here. In fact, it's Mantle Team, river here. And I don't know why I just assumed that they were on that specific side, and why it bothered me so much that they were in fact on the opposite side, but I don't know. Also, I've already seen a couple theories as to how this Grimm River, or Grimver as some people have taken to call it, came to be, with the most likely one being that these rivers of Grimm just simply run beneath the surface of the entire world, sort of like ley lines. And this is how New Grimm come to be in all the new kingdoms, well, all the various kingdoms. Another theory is that Salem, she managed to bring the pools of Grimm with her, which goes hand in hand with the theory that she also managed to stuff the pool of light into the head of the Grimm whale, which is why it's glowing. My personal crack theory, because I don't believe this to be true, I just thought it was a funny idea, is that Salem, she's just taking the Grimm from her army, stuffing them in a massive blender, and then piping that down to the surface of Mantle to be like, well, this is one way to get my army here. A lot less trouble transporting all this mushed up Grimm than actual full-size creatures. There's also the theory that this Grimm River is just a stream of monstrous piss, but we don't talk about those people that believe that. Even though I just did. All in all, I really liked this episode, as I said at the start of this video, for a number of reasons. One, overall, it's got the best fight scene in this volume. There have been 3, each one better than the last. And 2, it's got one of the most satisfying fight scenes of the whole show, which is just Maria turning the tables on Neo and using the same tactics that Neo used on Yang on Neo. because Neo, when in the train, was just easily dodging, parrying, not really bothering to move her arms properly. And then she's coming up against someone who can react to things before they happen, even in her old age. And there's no way you can actually be able to land a hit on her unless, well, she's distracted. There's also the fact that I was partially correct in my theory video about how the hero's plans would fail, because we see that Penny didn't go up with Atlas, which was part of the reasons that it would fail. I said the broadcast would succeed, and it did. I also said that Watts wouldn't be bringing Penny to Ironwood, which he didn't. So, 2 out of 3. There were also more points, but 2 out of the 3 teams have already failed in a way that I said they would. So now we just need the siege of the crater, or Amity dropping on the crater. And well, that's 3 for 3. Anyway, I'm going to end this episode here because I've got to edit this before it's released. So if you enjoyed the video, if you have ways to suggest for me to improve this, if you have different interpretations of some of the events that happened, comment them down below. As seen in my previous reaction episode, I love having discussions in the comments, so I'll catch you in the next one.